Hello and welcome to today's session, which is entitled Minimizing End-User Disruption During Incident Response on macOS. My name is Mark Walker and I work in business development for Jamf's security portfolio. I'm joined today by my colleague Matt Taylor, who's our security consulting engineer. We both work in the EMEA region and we're super happy to be here speaking with you today. Our session today is about user experience. In the world of IT, it's inevitable that there'll be malware infections requiring the actions of incident response. And while it's typically fast-paced while the responding team is investigating, the IT organization will be dreading things like the cleanup effort, the end-user education effort, and of course the service desk tickets to handle. While organizations are focused on reducing the impact of attacks and quickly remediating, we don't generally look at the metrics of end-user impact. Even less frequently do we discuss this for end users using Macs, though these end users often have higher expectations than those using Windows devices of their device experience and privacy. So in this talk, we're going to discuss the importance of keeping a focus on end users during incident response and how to best structure incident response processes to minimize that impact. We'll propose an expansion of the metrics most security operations track that go beyond the baseline of security effectiveness and start to consider the impact of an incident to the organization. From there, we'll explore how IT and security teams can work together to simplify and automate much of the investigation, isolation, and remediation of an attack on macOS, while being respectful of the end user's privacy and productivity. By simplifying and codifying the most common types of inquiries to automatically gather information, much of the manual work of investigating an incident on Mac can be removed, even if the device is outside of the organization's environment. Once the investigation is complete, security can then leverage IT tools to allow for end-user re-education and drastically simplify cleanup. If we can keep an end user productive during an incident, isolate the attacker, and quickly remediate the attack without interrupting the end user or asking them to give up their Mac for cleaning, then as an organization, we've become more effective and efficient with our resources overall. So picture the scene. To many of you, this will be totally familiar. Within your organization, you've constructed a security maturity plan, and you've optimized your infrastructure protection in layers. From firewalls and vulnerability scanning on your perimeter, to content filtering, patching, and the use of SIEM solutions at a network level. Moving into malware detection and prevention on your endpoint devices, runtime verification to protect your apps, data loss prevention tools, and encryption to secure your data. And this is all underpinned by security awareness training for your users, something which often doesn't get the priority it rightly deserves. Which is ironic, as users are typically the weakest link in the chain. More training leads to much more informed users, and with so many dialogues and interfaces requiring acceptance or the click of an OK button nowadays, it's easy for users to fall foul of malware unless they really start to think. You're impenetrable, or at least if you're not impenetrable, you're in a very good place as far as cyber maturity goes. But then, pow. All of a sudden, something happens to one of your endpoints, and it's not great news. It's malware, and it's spreading fast to every server that the user is connected to, across your network, and to every client that's connected to that server, and then every other server that those users are connected to. Before you know it, you've got an outbreak which is spreading rapidly. One by one, your incident response plan starts to kick in. Your service desk call center lights up. There's a massive spike in calls coming in. So you quickly get started with your tried and tested incident response management process. You've probably got engineers or security analysts on call. These people will start to be polled and attend because, of course, no security incident happens at a decent time of the day. And once online and working, they quickly start to attempt to identify the source of the infection and to isolate devices so as to prevent the spread. All the while, your user communication plan falls into place with regular user communications and a dedicated incident status channel to within your organization for your stakeholders, such as board members and other senior leadership. And finally, as you progress through the incident, you inevitably find vulnerabilities which need patching, which kicks off a whole new remediation workflow. So the last thing typically on the InfoSec or IT team's mind at this point is that user. the person who's been identified as owning the machine from where this attack commenced. Their stress levels are spiking through the roof. They didn't really want to call it in. Nobody likes admitting they've fallen foul of an attack. And there's an issue for InfoSec here too. They want to be considered as adding value to end users, not be seen as the enemy. The user's productivity has gone from full to probably zero in no time at all. And thoughts of privacy run through their heads as well, with InfoSec professionals perhaps connecting to their machine and browsing through file structures and logs. The user is the biggest risk, but the user is also the reason why the business exists. Breaches can start from being as simple as responding to a well-engineered email that appears to come from your CEO. It looks perfectly legitimate, asking you to click something to update your company records. Once you click, the infection starts. It may not take visible effect immediately, but the intruder is in your system, in your network, looking for something to exploit. A body of research completed a couple of years ago by the University of Kent and the University of Oxford set out to codify how cyber attacks can cause harm and negative outcomes to organizations and their people. They also considered how these outcomes can spread as time passes. Overall, the researchers identified 5 key themes under which the impact, referred to in the article as cyber harm, from a cyber attack can be classified. They were physical, digital, economic, psychological, reputational, and social or societal. Each category contains specific outcomes that underline the serious impact cyber attacks can have. For example, under the physical and digital category, there's the loss of life or damage to infrastructure, while the economic category lists impacts such as a fall in stock price, regulatory fines, or reduced profits as a possibility. In the psychological theme, impacts such as individuals being left depressed, embarrassed, shamed, or confused are listed, while reputational impacts can include a loss of key staff, damaged relationships with customers, and scrutiny from the media. Finally, on a social or societal level, there's a risk of disruption to daily life, such as an impact on key services, a negative perception of technology, or a drop in internal morale in organizations affected by a high-level incident. So it's important to remember at this point that for most organizations, no matter what their industry and no matter their size, the most important asset is the people that work there. Employees are literally the lifeblood of organizations, and so it makes sense to look after them. Engaged and happy staff members are far more productive, perform better, and are less likely to look for work elsewhere. Remember also the very clear messaging that exists in relation to the Mac. People do their best work on Mac. If you look at everything that Apple does, their technology and their associated service offerings, everything is about seamless user experience. This focus and meticulous attention to detail doesn't just exist with competing operating systems. And so Mac users don't have the same expectations of their computing experience as other operating system users do. Their expectations are often significantly higher because of the way in which Apple works on whole product experience. At Jamf, our CEO, Dean Hager, has mentioned over a period of time how a focus on user experience has increased massively in importance for organizations. And this is true particularly over the period in time when we've been in the pandemic, since a user's experience with your organization's Mac endpoint technology is often their entire experience of all and any interaction with your company and your colleagues. When they onboard, they do so remotely without visiting your offices. When they perform their roles, they do so largely remotely with information technology solutions as the primary tool they use to interface with everyone and everything. And when the IT infrastructure goes wrong, such as when there's a malware infection on an endpoint device, there's then an immediate organizational impact. And let's not forget a personal one for that employee too. Now, those of us who've ever worked in a service desk environment will know that incident management is a well-defined process. There are methodologies such as ITIL supporting best practices in organizations of any size. And part of those practices are the collation of metrics. What you can see in this slide is an example of some of the more commonly used KPIs. Measures such as fixed at first contact rate. It's clearly important to try to get the user's issue resolved with one contact to avoid escalation and SLA breach. Incident quantity rates. Have we got emerging or declining incident quantities, indicating potential impact from wider issues in the IT infrastructure? SLA compliance, a really important one here. SLAs form the basis of the contracts we have with our customers or end users. How are we doing against our targets? Call resolution time. Clearly, the less time spent on the phone resolving an issue, the more issues we can resolve. This is a measure of efficiency and maturity. Software asset consumption. Are we making the best use of our licensing investments? And cost per call, so that we can see how cost effective we are. And all of these are great performance measures. However, can you see what's missing? In the gathering of common incident management data, we always tend to look at how efficiently the organization can respond to an incident, such as a malware outbreak. We rarely or never gather any data about the user or organizational experience. So what I'd like to do here is propose an expansion of the metrics that most security operations centers track. IT maturity is a journey, and so IT teams with mature processes should perhaps consider expanding their outlook beyond the baseline of security effectiveness and to consider the tangible impact of an incident to an organization and to the user. To measure the experience of the journey, we've got to think of this in the terms of an actual journey, a period of traveling from point A to point B. When you think of it in those terms, then the most important thing about your travels are how long did it take to get from A to B? How many times did you have to stop? Was it a comfortable journey, or did you get lost along the way and waste time? So if we convert these into actual metrics that matter in an organization, then we potentially need to start looking at endpoint availability. As a percentage of the available time between the start and the end of a security incident, how much time is the endpoint available to the end user for? And as an implied statistic, what has the impact on the user's productivity actually been? Measuring this is a key indicator of the actual impact felt during a malware infection, and it can be validated using a number of KPIs that are specific to the users in your organization and their role, including at its simplest level, the working time lost. What's the comparison between their time on the tasks they ought to be doing versus their time on the interruption? And you might consider user RTO or RPO. Aligned with much larger disaster recovery scenarios, user RTO describes how long the user can accept to be without their device, and RPO describes the interval of time that might pass during an incident before the potential quantity of data lost because of a malicious malware infection, perhaps ransomware, exceeds the user's maximum tolerance. Now, these might sound somewhat intangible measurements, and of course, measuring customer impact is a very challenging thing. But the theory is this: at the heart of effective customer experience measurement is the principle of measuring experience of the journey, as opposed to looking only at transactional touchpoints or overall satisfaction at the end of a particular event. Over the years, Jamf has developed a strong reputation for being best in class as an Apple MDM solution, specifically with Jamf Pro. However, we're now pressing forward with a complete strategy as an Apple enterprise management platform, which includes security at its heart. Apple Enterprise Management works best in this scenario by bringing together the best in two tools. These tools are quite separate and have different value to the organization, but by converging their workflows, we can really make a difference to how the user experiences a malware outbreak. The first tool is Jamf Pro. Jamf Pro is designed to automate device management for you while driving end-user productivity and creativity. It's the enterprise mobility management tool that empowers IT pros and the users they support by delivering on the promise of unified endpoint management for Apple devices. And Jamf Pro is typically the tool you'll find IT or endpoint management teams using to manage Apple devices in the enterprise. Added to this, we have Jamf Protect. Protect helps maintain Mac endpoint compliance, addresses antivirus needs by preventing macOS malware, and detects and remediates Mac-specific threats, all while maintaining minimal impact to the device and the end-user experience. And of course, it's no surprise that for most organizations, it's the tool that InfoSec teams will be focused on using. And by the convergence of these two as part of our Apple Enterprise Management platform, leveraging the amazing detections mechanisms within Jamf Protect and the enormous workflow possibilities in Jamf Pro, we can do amazing things that really make a difference. This allows you to create security orchestration, automation, and response functionality for your Mac fleet by leveraging policies created in Jamf Pro to remediate detections based on Jamf Protect. So at this point, let me hand over to my colleague Matt, who's going to take us through some examples at a more detailed technical level.
Thanks, Mark. To best understand the benefits of leveraging Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect together during incident response, it's useful to start with a brief overview of the principal steps of incident response as a process. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST for short, sets forth industry standard guidance for a security incident response cycle comprised of 4 key stages. A fundamental element for successful incident response, the preparation stage describes steps taken in an effort to prevent an incident from occurring or for their handling should they occur. The second stage is detection and analysis, whereby through monitoring a threat is detected, an analysis is undertaken to understand what the threat is, how it came to be, and the best method of response. Armed with the information gathered in the previous stage, the next step in the IR cycle is to take remediation action against the threat. Actions taken are best determined by analysis of the threat and the attack vector, but commonly includes malware removal, network isolation of the endpoint from critical systems, forensic artifact collection, and even redeployment of applications or even perhaps macOS itself. In the final stage of the cycle, post-incident activity, we should reflect on the incident and how it was handled in order to learn and improve our processes for next time. The speed and effectiveness of your team's response to a security incident directly correlates to the financial, operational, and reputational impact of that incident to your organization. Establishing an incident response process is a complex undertaking, but it's important to consider the strategy and implementation of this process through the lens of the end users that are frequently affected by it due to the potential impacting reasons Mark outlined earlier. For the next few slides, we're going to do exactly that, reviewing how the first and third stages of the incident response cycle can be streamlined and improved for the end user's benefit, leveraging the Jamf product portfolio. Now, appropriately preparing and hardening endpoints is the first and a fundamental step in preparing to handle and ideally even prevent security incidents in your organization. NIST's guidance advised that key to the prevention of incidents is implementation of tooling on your endpoints for ensuring host security through system configuration, malware detection and prevention, as well as developing network security through expressly permitted connectivity and limited access. Now, if we look at this guidance through the lens of the Jamf product portfolio, then the available solutions would be Jamf Pro, our flagship device management solution for hardening your endpoints and managing software updates. Jamf Protect, our endpoint security tool for comprehensive malware detection and prevention. Compliance Reporter, our security monitoring tool for deep security activity auditing and compliance monitoring. And finally, Wandera, for defending against cyber threats at the network layer through such features as phishing protection and zero trust network access. Now, the tooling deployed to your endpoint should be platform focused and offer comprehensive, timely support of the platform as well as the ecosystem as a whole. A commitment to offering support for new Apple releases as close as possible to the day of release also ensures that your organization is able to react to and pivot to events that occur across the security industry. Now, some incident responses may require redeployment of applications, configurations, or even macOS itself, directly impacting the end user and their productivity. Now, using pre-configured workflows that leverage automation features such as smart groups in Jamf Pro or automated device enrollment with Apple's deployment programs can reduce recovery time and impact the end user for the positive. Finally, more so than ever before, hackers are targeting end users through social engineering to gain access to systems. So training and awareness programs can be really, really effective in bolstering what is typically the weakest link in an organization's defenses. IT and InfoSec teams also have an opportunity to be trained in each other's technology solutions for fostering collaboration and efficiency in utilization. Diving into one of these points further, hardening of an endpoint is essentially reducing the attack surface on your Macs by securely configuring and monitoring their settings with device management. Industry standard security benchmarks are a fantastic resource for helping with this process, and there are a variety available to work against. Jamf Pro is the best tool in the portfolio for managing and enforcing compliance. Jamf Protect offers auditing of that compliance against CIS's macOS benchmark, while Compliance Reporter supports a wider variety of benchmarks, such as those even provided by NIST themselves. The route taken depends on the tooling available, but Jamf Pro, Jamf Protect, and Compliance Reporter all offer workflow capabilities for auditing and enabling remediation actions as devices are audited for their compliance against these benchmarks. When implementing endpoint hardening, it's really important to strike a balance between the security of the device and the experience of the end user on that device. Devices should be secured relevant to the classification level of their usage, their access, and the data contained on them, rather than enforcing unnecessarily strict technical controls that impact the end user experience. Different types of incidents require different response strategies, and organizations should be generally prepared to handle any incident, but should focus on being prepared to handle those that use common attack vectors. Understanding the detection and response capabilities of your security tooling deployed to endpoints and where IT's deployed tooling can assist is critical in doing so. It can be helpful to ask yourself these questions. What can we expect to detect and how? What options do we have for responding through automation, whether it be generically or in response to a specific type of attack? Can we do so silently and without downtime? If not, how can we effectively communicate to the end user when an incident does occur? This information allows us to implement automatic playbook responses built with the end user's experience in mind. Now let's move on to the third stage of the incident response cycle: containment, eradication, and recovery. It's at this stage where we're wanting to actually take action on an endpoint in order to remediate and resolve a threat. The speed in which you're able to respond is critical in both managing the risk and minimizing potential exposure, but also in reducing the impact on the end user, their productivity, and their RTO and RPO times, as Mark mentioned earlier. Two elements of a speedy response are timely detection and alerting of threats. So as an example, Jamf Protect alerts are raised in your console or in your SIEM within just a few seconds of the detection event, and the Jamf Pro response integration optionally triggered shortly afterwards. The second element is what remediation capabilities are available through tooling, often governed by IT, such as Jamf Pro, and how they can be invoked. By utilizing the proper detection and recovery tools, remediation and potential downtime for compromised systems can be significantly reduced. Now, aiding in the reduction of response times and removing human error from the equation is automation, whereby a specific or a generic response can be initiated on your endpoints. Now, this might be to address and resolve a threat through a pre-prepared playbook, such as an example we'll see shortly. Or it may be simply the collection of useful forensic artifacts from endpoints that occurs anytime a significant security event is detected. In this area, you're really mostly limited by your imagination rather than the technology. Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro customers are able to leverage the native integration between the two solutions that I've mentioned earlier. And it's designed to offer rapid, but importantly, triggered response capabilities within seconds of a threat detection without the need for any third-party tooling. However, there are also many security orchestration, automation, and response, or SOAR tools, on the market today that offer automation capabilities outside of the endpoint and even the Jamf portfolio, from simple tasks like sending alert notifications to Microsoft Teams to more complex workflows that touch many other systems. Some popular examples with official Jamf integrations include Palo Alto's Cortex XSOAR, a no-code solution called Torque, and even Microsoft's Azure Sentinel SIEM, which actually offers some fantastic native SOAR functionality through their Playbooks feature. Now, as mentioned earlier, this stage of the IR cycle really is powered by the detection and analysis stage prior to it. Information gathered about a security event is critical in determining what response is needed and how. Tools like Compliance Reporter provide always-on telemetry, meaning that deep and rich data on system, user, application, and network activity is available as soon as necessary, including even historical backtracking. Due to the constant streaming, it's available in the seam immediately after the event occurs, no need to go and fetch it retrospectively. The Jamf Protect and Pro response integration can be used to acquire and upload specific or even a generic set of forensic artifacts from an endpoint using a policy and script triggered seconds after the event. Indeed, we have many of our customers using such workflows today. Always-on telemetry and automatic artifact acquisition provide your InfoSec team the information they need when they need it, without impacting the end user with downtime or even physical loss of their device for manual investigation. Now, in situations where a silent incident response isn't feasible, when and how you communicate to an end user on their device is critical. Atlassian has published a fantastic resource discovering the importance of end user communication during incident response, the key elements of which are to communicate quickly and accurately to help build trust, alerting the end user as soon as possible, provide informative updates whenever possible, notify the end user upon resolution, including any additional steps that they need to take or impact that they can expect, and where appropriate, provide post-incident reviews and learnings. Now, when crafting communication, being acknowledging, empathetic, and understanding can be effective in reducing the chance of the cyber harm factors that Mark mentioned earlier. And depending on the type of incident, how the messaging is delivered and by whom is just as important as the message itself. Having consistent messaging through templates and delivery methods of that communication through trusted, established platforms and processes helps build user trust and reassurance. Let's now review an example security incident using the principles and considerations we've just covered. In this scenario, we're going to examine a common attack against Mac users, malware that is masquerading as an Adobe Flash Player installation in an attempt to trick a user into installing it. As this is a well-known attack vector and one that we know Jamf Protect is capable of detecting through behavioral analytics, we've implemented a playbook response through Jamf Pro that will mitigate the threat through various preventative actions, remove the downloaded file, perform an acquisition of the file, as well as many other forensic artifacts for further investigation by InfoSec, and we're also going to use a fantastic tool called Mac at IBM Notifications, as it's a simple and easy to configure tool for end user communication. Firstly, you might be asking why we're using the example of a suspicious Adobe Flash Player download. On the surface, it may appear to be an outdated and ineffectual lure, but the reality is actually quite the opposite. This social engineering attack has been a commonplace infection vector for malware authors since 2011 and has been involved in some of the most prevalent malware campaigns targeting macOS in that time. Now, the most notorious example, I'd say, is the Trojan Schleyer, thought at one point to have infected up to 1 in 10 Macs globally. And more recently, the adware adload, although the list of known campaigns having used this technique is expansive. With Schleyer alone, security researchers for more than 1,000 partner websites were found to be distributing the malware, with more than 700 domains found to redirect to download pages. As a testament to this type of attack technique, a new variant of another malware named Zloader has recently been distributing using a similar technique, masquerading as TeamViewer instead of Adobe Flash. Now, while this malware targets another platform, it's an indication of the success malicious actors are having and have seen with masquerading as trusted vendors. This example attack generally functions by a user being directed, normally by poisoned search engine results or even social channels, to a malicious website whereby they're advised of an out-of-date Flash player needing to be updated before they're able to proceed. Now, this attack vector preys on the end user's force of habit, as well as a lack of security awareness. Most end users are simply familiar with the name of the product, not the fact that it's now entirely deprecated. In other words, it's a social engineering attack. Now, in more recent examples, some malware authors have even provided on-screen instructions in the downloaded DMG for guiding users through bypassing the native security function Gatekeeper. Apple does a fantastic job of hardening macOS more and more each year through native security, but such attacks that socially engineer a user into bypassing these protections themselves shows how important end-user security awareness really is. The fact that Adobe Flash Player was deprecated in December of 2020 also makes this a fantastic candidate for a playbook remediation, because we're able to respond with a very high confidence level that this is indeed a positive alert. We also know that authors of these attacks use common keywords in the names either of their DMG or of the volume that's mounted from it or of the contents of the DMG, such as Flash, Player, Media, Installer, in their file name. So we can actually use this information to aid in our response, as well as accessing the direct file path to the downloaded file locally on the device from the alert from Jamf Protect. You can tune into JNUC session 1201 for a deeper dive into how we're achieving this, but for now, let's take a look at the example. Now, in this video, we can see that the user has been directed to a website that looks like it's offering a legitimate Adobe Flash Player download. The Flash logo is present, it's familiar, and users are so often used to selecting OK on pop-up windows, it's a very easy trap to fall into. Now, in this case, the user does, and we can see a file downloaded called Adobe Flash Player DMG. This suspicious download event is alerted to within Jamf Protect, seen here. We're able to see information about the event, such as the download URL. The user opens the DMG and is offered what appears to be an installer, but what is actually a command file that will execute malicious code when run. Gatekeeper thankfully prevents the user from simply double-clicking the file, but the user can follow the instructions kindly provided by the malware author to bypass Gatekeeper's checks and execute the file anyway. However, before they're able to do so, the response playbook is initiated by Jamf Pro and a few things quickly happen. The end user is notified with a trustworthy templated communication, including the corporate logo and email address. In the background, the downloaded file is moved and secured from the end user, and the DMG was detected and ejected. The DMG and many other forensic artifacts, such as installation, amount logging, browser history to see where exactly it came from, are uploaded to a secure location for inspection. And the user also has the option to learn more about why the event occurred on this Adobe resource. So what have we seen here? Well, a commonly used social engineering attack that seeks to trick end users into installing malware was detected, mitigated, and successfully resolved. Due to the speed, accuracy, and nature of the response, there was minimal impact on the end user's productivity. We provided clear and reassuring communication to the end user as soon as the event was resolved to explain the behavior that they saw on their screen. We also provided an avenue to learn more on why this event is suspicious, as well as ensuring the notification itself was trustworthy with recognizable corporate information. Finally, to permit further investigation by InfoSec, we automatically and silently collected many additional forensic artifacts from the endpoint and uploaded them to a secure location. InfoSec can complete their investigation and work with IT to complete any additional remediation that might be necessary without needing physical access to the end user's device. Now, this is just one example of many workflow possibilities using the discussed principles with Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro. I'll now hand back to Mark.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to everyone for being here with us today. I hope you've enjoyed our talk where we've dived into user experience, particularly in relation to remediating information security events. We've covered in detail why it's important to think about the actual human experience of being part of a security incident. I would encourage you as part of this to dig into your security plans and consider them from the lens of being an end user. What does it feel like to be part of the plan from this viewpoint? We've described how most organizations track metrics to measure the performance of their IT and security teams, but don't actually look at anything further than transactional touchpoints. We'd encourage you to consider what metrics it might be possible for you to measure within your organization that look at the user and the direct impact to them, both physically and emotionally. We've seen that with simple automation using the best tools which IT and security teams have together, It's a very good approach to creating a true end-to-end workflow and ensuring that security incident handling and cleanup is an efficient process, which, if not enjoyable by the end user, is certainly efficient with time and easy on the human emotions and feelings involved. And all the while, the byproduct of handling issues in this manner has shown that your organization respects the time of its employees. It's serious about maintaining their privacy and places real value in ensuring that its employees' welfare is considered first. And in this way, you increase your overall retention and productivity. So with that, all that remains is to thank you all again for your time with us today. Both Matt and I hope that this session has been enjoyable and that you've been able to pick up some points of value to you and your organization. We wish you all the very best and look forward to seeing you succeed with securing Apple in the enterprise.